Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV. It is September 10th. We're headed into the day that we will forever, ever remember, September 11th. But September is National Yoga Month. The Department of Health and Human Services in 2008 declared September as National Yoga Month, and there are activities that are happening around the country and around your communities, and I'm sure there will be a lot of things happening as we continue on through the month. But I'm very excited to have tonight at the Wellness Radio TV studios a gentleman who has been a part of the yoga practice, yoga and Tai Chi and many other practices as it relates to Eastern healing, Professor K.A. Shakur. Thank you very much for being here.
Ms. Coons, thanks for inviting me on the show. Wellness Network, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so not only is he Mr. Professor, but doctor in the final stages of your PhD in Chinese medicine.
That's right, yeah. A doctorate in clinical Oriental medicine is the correct title. So it's like a clinical PhD.
Clinical PhD.
Yes.
In Oriental medicine.
Oriental medicine, yes.
With September being recognized as National Yoga Month, how significant is that compared to you've been practicing for 50 years and teaching?
I've been practicing for over 50 years and teaching for 30.
Yeah, I was trying to get you practicing teaching when you were, like 5 or 6 years old. But your mom started you in yoga. Yeah,
my mom started me actually in energetic and mind-body practices, which is probably a bigger umbrella. And so when I was 8 years old, I started with a Japanese art called Aikido, which means the way of moving energy. Ki means energy in Japanese. So it's a way of spirit energy or mind energy. It has many different translations. And so in those times, one studied 3 or 4 disciplines at once. So disciplines weren't separated like they are now. So I studied, our warm-ups were hatha yoga exercises. We did meditation, and we did Aikido practice. So we did all 3 things in one class. And so I found this was also with many of the other teachers that I had, and I had a lot of personal teachers, that you had to study 3 or 4 different disciplines in order to train. So if we were doing what people call Kung Fu or other Tai Chi, Ji Kung was a warm-up, as well as yoga stretching was a form of a warm-up. So you study 3 or 4 different disciplines, even though they might be a primary. Today, everything in today's world, you have yoga here, you have Tai Chi here, you have different systems that are separated.
But they integrated it all until you...
Because originally they all were integrated.
And so in this month of National Day of Yoga, when the image that we see of people who are practicing yoga, if you're in the checkout line at the grocery store, the yoga magazines, you see the shows, the lessons with people who are practicing yoga. They don't look like you or I, but black people have always been doing yoga. We just didn't know about it here.
Well, let me say this. Yoga means, it has many different definitions to it, but it means, my definition would be, and it would probably be congruent to most definitions that you would see, is the connection, or any type of discipline that connects or integrates the mind, body, and spirit, okay, would technically come under the classification of yoga. So that could be dance, that could be swimming, that could be a number of things. Any type of system or discipline or exercise or activity that connects those 3 things in the classical sense. Now, we're talking about exercises now. So in the relative sense, what people look at yoga is a series of exercises that they associate with India. So let me speak on that. The original inhabitants of India were the Dravidian people. The Dravidian people were African, Asiatic people that were there, or black folks, if you want to put it that way. And what happened was, and there are people that argue these histories now, saying that there was not an Aryan invasion into India, Aryan being people that came from the north that would be considered more European in texture, that culture came in and wiped out the Dravidian civilization. But all the older textbooks on history clearly state that the Dravidian people were Afro-Asiatic people, and even if you go to southern India today, you'll find that those people are very, very dark. Anyway, yoga is credited to have started in southern India, and since many people believe that the continents were connected, but even if you don't believe that, the cultures were connected. You had a similar culture being practiced on the Nile Valley, which we call Egypt, or many of us call Kemet, where you find on bas reliefs on pyramid and temple walls people practicing postures that we call yoga. So yoga goes way back, further than 6,000 years. It depends on how you want to count history. It's very, very old, and yes, it is accredited to people of darker skin. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up, or that you asked me and I'm elaborating on it, because there's been a great, in my personal opinion, misconception or maybe cover-up to not associate the founders of the yoga tradition as being people of dark skin, or the fact that we had a great amount of, we are great contributors to the yoga culture, not only just the physical exercises, but the medical benefits that they are associated with, as well as the philosophical aspects to go along with that.
Why is it that you think that we hear the word yoga, and yoga is, as you mentioned, it is the marriage between the mind, the body, and the spirit, and if you are alive today and you are doing anything, it is a form of your mind, your body, and your spirit working, but you may not recognize your abilities and how to exercise the control over your mind and the body and the spirit. Not understanding it, I think, is what is so challenging for people, and this helps to teach them to understand it better. Yet there's some resistance, especially in the African American community.
Well, it has to, in my opinion. I've been practicing yoga since 1963. Okay, so that's practically all my life. And one energetic exercise and mind-body exercise in one form or another, probably 2 or 3 exercises. I raised my children on it, and been doing it, period. So let me say this. I come out of an urban area that was predominantly what you call Black City. Okay, and in that process, a lot of misunderstandings have come about because of miseducation or lack of education. And so therefore, many people associated yoga with the incorrectly called the Hindu religion or Vedic practices. And so there are people that feel that if people practice yoga, that somehow it will deviate them away from their religious belief, which is the furthest thing from the truth. But this is how people have been conditioned. Yoga is basically, and any other mind-body energetic exercise is designed to do just what I stated, connect the mind, the body, and the spirit so that a person has a better quality of life so they can reach their maximum efficiency in this lifetime. That's basically what it's for. It has nothing to do with what faith or non-faith that a person has.
And I do believe that yoga lifts all minds when it's practiced in a very, very healthy way. And I think I don't understand why people who say that they are Christians are uncomfortable when they start talking about the spirit man and the mind. And there are scriptures that clearly say that if you keep your mind stayed on me, I will keep you in perfect peace, stayed on God. And the scriptures that tell us to meditate. Yet so many people feel like meditation is some woo-woo-woo-woo.
Well, there again, like many things, it has to do with, again, lack of education or miseducation on these subjects. And since we speak of, and I like to make these generalizations, historically, Naturally, we know the history of marginalized communities in this country, and particularly in relationship to black people or people of African origin or people of dark skin. Everybody has a different type of definition they like to define themselves as, but I think we all know what we're talking about. One research that I did showed there were over 250 thriving black towns in the United States. All those towns were burnt to the ground. People know about Rosewood, and naturally there's some more information on Black Wall Street, but there were 248 other towns that were just as autonomous, but they were burnt to the ground. We also know that there were laws in this country up to a certain point that blacks should not be taught to read. Then we also know that the information on history has definitely been skewed. Just basic information, like the first person that died for American independence was Crispus Attucks. There's naturally photographs and pictures to depict this. We know that the White House that our current president now sits in was not only just built, because when you say built, people think he might have just been some slave building it, but it was designed. And the whole city of Washington, D.C. was designed by a black man who was an architect. That means he was an architect, that means he had intelligence, understood engineering and mathematics and all the different types of skills and information one has to have in order to be an architect. Benjamin Banneker. Those are just basic basic information.
A self-taught mathematician,
right,
and engineer and surveyor.
Right, but that the White House is still standing today, and that city is still unique. Washington, D.C. is unique compared to other cities in the country. But what I'm saying is, because this basic information is not even known, let alone like the inventor of the stops like being a black person, blood transfusion, Dr. Charles Drew, and on, there's been a miseducation and a misconception among people of all races that black people in particular have done nothing to contribute positively into the world culture, as far as science, as far as, well, we get credit for music, but as far as science and academics are concerned.
Like the movie about the women at the Space Center, Hidden Figures.
That's right.
You know, it's amazing that we saw all of the liftoff of space shuttles, but didn't even know that there were women working there, let alone African American women.
And also had that high knowledge of physics. I can personally say I attended a community college in Detroit called Wayne County Community College, and my chemistry teacher was Dr. Sam Ajiri, who's from Nigeria. I understand he's a king today, if he's still living in Nigeria. But this man had 3 PhDs, I think 2 from MIT and 1 from Harvard, and probably wrote 5 to 7 chemistry and physics books.
Wow. And
I remember, and this was in the early 70s, that he would fly back and forth to Nassau because he built rocket parts for Nassau.
Wow.
You see, a black man. So I'm just saying, in the areas of singing and dancing and entertainment, this is what the media projects. But as far as having consciousness, the general media basically projects there are basically only 2 or 3 black men that ever had any knowledge. That's former President Obama, Martin Luther King, is like being the only black man that had any kind of intelligence, you know. So they don't want to subscribe. This is my personal opinion, that blacks had anything to do with anything that deals with academics or thinking. This is projected in the media. This is projected on the silver screen. Basically, you know, you're an entertainer, you know. So even blacks that have diversified into other fields of business and what have you in our current society today, most of them were started off as athletes or started off as entertainers. So that's still the stereotype. You still considered an entertainer. I will give one example. Shaquille O'Neal has a PhD in education, but when they make reference to Shaquille O'Neal, they talk about the fact, naturally him being a basketball player, naturally the fact of the titles he won with the Lakers and the one that he won with Miami, and then he was a rapper. They never mention the fact that this man has a PhD in education. He's a sheriff, and he's also a well-accomplished businessman. But the concept of having a superior mind or intelligent mind is something that's always downplayed.
And so, in this month of National Yoga Month, how do we encourage African Americans to embrace this practice that helps to strengthen the mind? And, there's a Chinese proverb that says, when the mind is disturbed, the body is injured. And so when we look at the health statistics across our community and dialysis clinics that are so prevalent in African American neighborhoods across this country, how do we start encouraging people to think and to use this tool that's been said to be the pinnacle of God's creation, the mind?
Well, basically, there have been many studies done in Mayo Clinic, Harvard University, University of Florida School of Nursing, National Institute of Health, Johns Hopkins Hospital, and on and on. And so basically when I talk to people, and particularly if you say black people, these are the types of studies that you want to refer to. So because the way we are conditioned, that if the larger or the dominant society is doing it, it must be okay. So in fact, if in white churches, yoga is being practiced, and in white high schools and middle school, yoga and meditation is being practiced, and most of the people that go to those schools and church, are still going to church, and those churches that have yoga practices, Tai Chi and Qigong, meditation, and other such disciplines at their church, their faith is not affected, their ministry is not affected, because they're using the tools that are going to best bring about the best wellness for their people. In our society, or in our communities, basically, and I don't mean anything by it, but it's basically basketball and boxing, or maybe football, violent arts and violent activities. And I like all three of those activities. But first of all, there are only 400 plus jobs in the NBA. Football has a very short life, and we're finding out the negative effects that it has on the body, particularly the neurological system. So only so many people are actually going to even make it to the top level. And then even if you make it to the top level, how many people even last long enough season after season, because every year they're bringing in new people to actually accumulate enough finance to be able to survive. So therefore, that's not really a realistic goal for the majority of our people.
So what should we be talking to our children about as it relates to strengthening the mind first, even before the body? So you were a little African-American male child in the 60s practicing yoga. What did your friends say about that?
Well, I had, first of all, let me say this. I'd like to give I have to say shout out to my mother, who is 97 years old.
Oh, wow.
And,
where does your mom live?
She lives in Detroit, Michigan. And my mother encouraged me in everything that I'm doing. And I would say, for me, she might even been a visionary or maverick for her time when I look back and think about the things she exposed me to. Yeah, some people had problems with how my mother raised me and the activity she had me in to some degree, but most of the people in my neighborhood were involved in those different type of activities. The only thing that I can say is that it does start at home. See, like what my mother told me and what my family told me and reinforced is this: you're okay regardless of what the situation is. So you never have to sell out, and you never have to do things that's going to make you feel less than yourself just to get a job or just to get money or just to feel like you're somebody. Okay, and understanding that, and then naturally mind-body exercises of different types help reinforce that, because in order to practice that, you have to focus within yourself. That in itself is an automatic meditation. It doesn't necessarily mean you just sit still in some cross-legged position. That's a very stereotypic view of what meditation or mindfulness is. Anytime you're doing an activity that is a self-activity, whether one is playing music, whether one is doing art, whether one is doing cooking, whether one is doing sewing. All those things are yoga-type activities because it connects the mind, body, and spirit, even gardening. But if you look at our educational system, especially public schools, all these artistic endeavors, creative and creator, are synonymous. So there's a creator of the universe, by whatever name we want to call it, and that creative element is inside the human being. So when you take creative aspects away to where young people aren't able to create, then they're left, in my personal opinion, in a dead state.
Wow.
And so then what happens is, socioeconomic statement, industry, and we know this, has moved out of not only just the inner cities, but out of America, period, into other countries where they work people for little or nothing. And then a lot of the economy had become, especially in urban cities, have become a drug culture. And then to support that, you have a entertainment industry that went from positive, quote, hip hop music to a glorifying criminal aspect to reinforce the drug culture, to fill the jails, to so forth and so on. So I mean, I think everybody understands that. So what has to happen, to go back to your original question, is that people have to deal with the re-education. A re-education has to take place. And just recently, we lost a very, very famous singer. She made a transition, Aretha Franklin. But the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because the current minister at Aretha Franklin's church was a member of a health club that I taught yoga at. And he was so progressive that he ended up bringing the whole health, all the instructors from the health club, and did a health sermon.
Is that right?
His Sunday sermon was a health sermon. So not only, so this is what happened. He started off with his sermon. He had verses to support why health should be like they were. And he had a variety of verses from the Bible, Old Testament and the New Testament. The choir sang a few songs, and then we did the rest of the sermon, the rest of Sunday service. So let me explain this last part.
Okay.
So they had the aerobic instructor came on with his people and then took the congregation through some basic aerobics while they were in the pews. And so when my turn came, and other folks came. So I was teaching Tai Chi and doing yoga. So what my Tai Chi students did, we took they selected some gospel songs, and they did Tai Chi to gospel. And then I went out and took people through some Qigong exercises, some of them that actually had clapping your hands because there's some channels here. And so we did clapping the hands, snapping the fingers, raising the arms, like there's things that people already were doing in church anyway, when they get that feeling of that Holy Ghost, you know, and took them through some basic yoga practices that they did right in the pew. And what happened was, I can say when I left the city of Detroit, I can speak of this personally, visiting and teaching and doing workshops in at least 10 black churches of different denominations, GOIC, Baptist churches, Methodist churches, and Catholic churches.
Wow.
You know, but that was over teaching in a town for over 10 to 15 years, where I kind of put that forth.
And I would challenge you as you think about, just take a mental tour of your church and look around and see the physical conditions of people, whether it's in your church, in your home, on your job, and think, whatever we're doing, something is not quite right. This vessel is failing, and it should not be. And the scripture clearly tells us how to take care of the vessel. And I grew up in the church. I gained a greater appreciation for what that scripture says, that the Holy Spirit can't live in an unclean temple, through really understanding the connection between my body, my mind, and my spirit.
Well, I will say this, since you brought up Christianity, there is a Christian yoga. I guess people can Google that in. I think the one problem that the black Christian community has had is that most books on yoga use a lot of Vedic and Indian terms, and it confuses people.
Well,
And
I think a different language confuses a lot of people.
Well-
and we have to, if we can just embrace that, Jesus Christ did not speak English, and so we get uncomfortable with other words.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is not just the words, but the way the information is imparted. A lot of time, not only the language, but the culture and the subtle religious aspects from that culture is put into it. And a lot of time, people are not able to separate. Now, more and more that's happening because yoga has become the #1 exercise in this country. So a lot of that has been separated to where it's just exercise and the physiological benefit.
Right.
But when you ask why has it been, and you know how it is, once people get certain things in their mind in the beginning, it becomes difficult for them to see the change.
Right. And as you pointed out, yoga is big in America now, and not as big as it can get. Currently, a $16 billion industry.
Right, but you find most yoga studios in not just white communities, but usually in upper middle class and university towns in that area. Very few yoga studios are in working class communities or in black communities. And so what needs to happen? Like what I did, there's a brother named Yasir in Chicago. There are instructors around the country that
there's an international black yoga association.
Black instructors or African American instructors, black instructors, whatever term you want to use for us, we have to train instructors so that they can go out and teach, and they train instructors. You understand? When I left Detroit, I left 15 instructors. Okay, so that's what has to happen, and that's how it spreads. One instructor that I left is a deacon of a church. Okay, so he's teaching in that particular church, and he's training people. And one lady is a member of a Catholic parish that's predominantly black that holds still holding weekly yoga classes. So
it is being embraced.
It's slow, but it's happening.
Yeah.
It's slow, but it's happening. So I can speak about that. I've been in Gainesville 10 years, and it just takes more education and people being more open-minded and Google in the studies, the benefits of yoga for your heart, the stress reduction, digestion, weight loss. People suffer from insomnia. The breathing exercises alone will help you with the insomnia and sleep. Will help many people suffer with mental health diagnosis. Yoga is very good to where maybe you don't have to take as many different types of other medications, extreme amount of medications a lot of times that we have to take. A lot of times we can take health into our own hands, and therefore this serves as a good adjunct to whatever regimen you might be on, to where maybe you can actually not be on it, possibly.
Yeah. Professor K.A. Shakur, and you've authored a book, Ghetto Sutra. This is volume 1, The Consciousness of Transcending Suffering and Racism. Ghetto Sutras. What brought this book about?
Well, what brought it about is I'm a practitioner of meditation, and I'm of the Buddhist faith, and a lot of times people have a misconception of what that is. First of all, Buddhism is not a religion. It is a philosophy of thinking. So a person can have any religion and still be a Buddhist. It focuses on the mind. And what I found through living is that one of the main things that have affected our people, maybe all people, is that we don't truly understand our mind, and we don't a lot of times have control over our own thoughts and mind. We basically being manipulated by other people's thoughts rather than dealing with our own thoughts. And I find as long as you going to medical school also taught me this also, that as long as we hold on to anger, and anger in Oriental medicine affects the sight, but it's not only the physical sight, but it's the spiritual sight. And since you speak of the Bible, there's a verse in the Bible to say if the single eye is full of light, the body is full of light. So in order for us to have that light and that understanding, we have to discharge the anger that we carry. And we carry a lot of resentment, a lot of anger. And it also affects, on the physical level, our digestive system. you know.
And an unforgiving spirit resides in the liver.
That's right. Anger, and then
Anger.
resentment is the gallbladder. So gallbladder is what we call the male, and the liver is the female, so they're connected together. The gallbladder emits bile that helps with digestion. So many of us, because we've gone through human beings go through personal suffering as well as collective suffering, and sometimes it's generational, and we carry things with us. We have to let go of the past so that we can move forward. Understand the past, but as long as we carry resentment and hatred, it only holds us down.
And the stress causes injury to the body.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So many of the mental health situations are direct, and especially coming from Oriental medicine point of view, comes from anger. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Just the mental health things, and a lot of cardio imbalances also.
And so this practice that can help relieve stress, help us to understand how powerful the mind is in helping to correct some of the challenges that the physical body is having.
It's like this. Analogy I used the other day is like the 100-yard dash. If a person looks at track and field, you look at the 100-yard dash, the 220, 440, the runners are in a lane. And especially 100 and 220. If you start looking right or left, you're going to lose that race, because there's only so you have to focus. You have to stay straight in your lane and focus on that finish line. And what mindfulness and meditation helps one do is focus on. It helps you focus on yourself and staying in your lane so that you can get to the finish line. Meaning healthy body, financial wherewithal, education. That you become totally focused. But you have to, when we start looking around and looking back, you can't win a 100-yard dash if you turn back and look back. You have to look forward. You can't look right or left. You look straight ahead. And what we don't do, in my personal opinion, because it's a mind thing, we get distracted. And there's a lot of things to distract us.
Yes.
Naturally, the media.
Or events that have happened in our past distract us.
Right.
And then we start projecting what we think is going to happen in the future.
But
another distraction.
What I was going to say about the media, because they many a times make shows of various types, they make their numbers based off controversy. And so what happened is, because of events of the past, a lot of times they exasperate that situation, because a lot of the subject matter focuses on the emotions. And so therefore it fuels, and so using a yoga concept, we say the emotions is fire. We say the mind is like associated with wind. So when you affect a person's emotions and the mind is not focused, then it becomes like a wind blowing on fire. And so it just keeps, you know what happens when wind hits fire, it just keeps going and keeps going to where it burns up everything. So that burning up becomes stroke, heart attack.
Wow.
You see, digestive issues to the point where
heartburn.
Yes, those types of things, or being blood deficient, because we aren't able. The food is not able to totally process itself to go into the heart to build blood. So we become blood deficient. So therefore, according to our medicine, Oriental medicine, a person has insomnia because they're blood deficient. Not enough blood, nervousness, high strung, can't sleep. That's not the only reason, but that is a primary reason.
And that's amazing. And then when we're asleep, that's when the body has a chance to heal. But if you're suffering from all of these things and then insomnia on top of that, it's a formula for getting diagnosed with something.
It's just a matter of you begin to run a race in the opposite direction to self-destruction.
Wow, you're running a race in the opposite direction.
To self-destruction.
Towards self-destruction.
That's right.
Wow, Shakur.
Right. Yeah, so it becomes, it's an easy formula once people can deal with the concept of taking back control over their own mind.
National Yoga Month. We're talking about African Americans and where we are in our thought process about incorporating the mindfulness of yoga into our lives so that we can live healthy, harmonious lives and be the best and live out this journey with the purpose, living purposefully, and what we were sent here to accomplish. Shakur, we could sit here and talk about this all evening.
Yes.
I look forward to talking to you some more. If you would like to, can people get your book?
This book is on Amazon, so they can order it on Amazon.com. Ghetto Sutras.
Ghetto Sutras. And you have some poses, in pictures of poses in the book that are used for various things.
Basically, this book's focused on teaching one how to, teaching the technique of mindfulness, which is not meditation, it's premeditation. It deals with clearing the mind or washing the mind. So I show 3 techniques. The mindfulness
Clearing them
technique,
all and then putting the good stuff in.
right, and then I show a clear light, how one can then open up their higher senses, and then I show another rejuvenation breathing exercise, which is very ancient. It goes all the way back to ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet, called cobra breathing.
Just
so that's what's in there.
Really quickly, talk to our viewers really quickly about what we're putting in our mouth that's going into our gut and how it's affecting our inability to think.
Well, this is what I'm going to say about food. In Asian medicine, before we even get to what you're eating, let's understand about the times you eat. So the first thing that I talk to people about is the time clock. So the best time to eat heavy food is between 7 and 9 in the morning and 9 and 11. Why? Because the heart needs the food. And studies have shown that more heart attacks take place in this country between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Most people do not eat proper breakfasts or proper food in the morning because they're in a rush or they feel like they don't want to eat. Then normally they eat all this heavy food late at night when actually the organs that deal with processing the food for the heart are basically, that's not their time. And so this, a lot of times, leads not only to overweight issues, but it also can damage the cardio and cause this extreme amount of problems. So the first thing we want to understand is how people used to eat up until 100 years ago, because basically we're agrarian societies around the world until automation and the technological age has only been around the last 100 years, or a little over 100 years. So people ate heavy food because they had to get up and work. And then they went to sleep when the sun goes down. Now things go 24 hours a day. So then what ends up happening is people eating heavy food 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Grazing all day long.
Right. So the first thing, if you deal with the time of day you eat, that's going to change somewhat what you eat, because certain foods most people don't want to eat in the morning. Okay, like sweets, for example. Most people don't want to eat that in the morning. They want to wait till late at night and eat a lot of comfort food. And so now we're dealing with the mind issues, because the tongue in our medicine connects to the heart. So certain kinds of food deal with certain psychological states. As a person becomes more calm and relaxed, automatically the desire to overeat or overconsume certain types of foods is automatically going to reduce itself. Okay, that doesn't mean you never eat it, but it reduces itself. It's balanced. And when you eat certain times of the day, if you eat in the morning, you up in the daytime, your body, the food is fuel for the body, you burn it off. But if you eat heavy food at night and go to sleep, you just pack it in. Yeah, there's certain things that begin to naturally.
You're packing it in, and when your body is supposed to be resting and healing itself, it's having to process the stuff.
The secret to longevity, when I grew up, I mean, I'm thinking about all the people I knew growing up that lived to be 90 and 100 years old. It was not uncommon that most of the people I knew lived that age.
And your mom, an example,
yeah.
90 what?
97.
97.
But it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. Why? Because eating at a certain time, the same time during the day, is one thing. Your body's a machine, so therefore you get it functioning in the right order. Eating at the times when one should basically eat according to nature, which is heavy food in the morning. Sleeping and trying to be asleep before 10 or 11 o'clock, because that's the time when the body really rejuvenates itself. There are certain times that are better times than others. These are the things that I teach and talk about first before I even tell people don't eat this and don't eat that. First, let's learn how to eat, and the times when to eat. And when that happens, that begins to adjust a whole lot of things right there.
Wow.
Because what happens is you begin to listen to your own body, and after a while, your clear mind intelligence begins to tell you, I'm not going to eat certain things, I don't need to eat this, or I should eat that.
And I feel better, I sleep better when I don't go to bed with all of that on my stomach.
Right, and your
wake
mental
up.
state, the mental state is better. I mean,
Right.
everything.
Right.
Yes.
Dr. Shakur, great conversation about African Americans and yoga during this National Yoga Month, and the author of Ghetto Sutras. You can get this book on Amazon. It is quite an interesting read, and just answering some questions that you might have so that you can move forward in improving your quality of life, because that's all this really is about.
That's right.
How do we improve the quality of life? We don't just want to be here. We want to live a good quality of life while we're here. We all got to go at some
That's
point,
right.
but at least while we're here, to live the way the Creator intended for us to live, and we put things in our bodies and in our minds and work toward that spiritual connection that will help us to do that. I really,
Thank you
really
very much, Ms.
appreciate
Combs, for
you
having me.
stopping by
Yeah,
here
thank
tonight.
you very much.
And we're gonna get on out of here so we can get started in our deep realm sleep, so we
That's
can
right.
get some healing going
That's
about. And I thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you will like and share and continue to stay in touch with us here at the Wellness Radio TV. Check out your community and see what kinds of classes are being held for National Yoga Month, and start your own practice. Good idea. I'm Pamela Coons at the Wellness Radio TV. Remember, there is healing at the well. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very, very much. It's good stuff.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So you gonna make a copy of this?
I will.
You can send this to my email, or I have to get another one. I'm sorry.